Hello and welcome to the fifth installment of the COVID-19 webinar series hosted by the Joint Perfusion COVID-19 Taskforce. Today's webinar will focus on COVID-19 impacts on manufacturers and case volume data from perfusion services companies. Today's webinar consists of the following speakers. My name is Carla Mall and I am one of your moderators. My co-moderators today is James Rieger, the Director of Perfusion at Cincinnati Children's Hospital, Justin Farr, Perfusion Director at St. Joseph's Hospital in Tampa with Comprehensive Care Services, and Megan Clancy, Product and Business Development at Boehringer Laboratories. Megan.
Thank you. Prior to getting started with the webinar, we'll briefly review some of the results from the survey sent out after the last webinar. We had 152 people participate in the result from the survey sent out. We had 15 different countries, and that was representing about half of the participants on the last live broadcast. The first graph here picture demonstrates the average number of cardiac cases performed pre-COVID, and the second graph is the average number of cases performed around May 15th when the survey was distributed. As you can see, there was a significant drop in case volume. And this next graph shows the anticipated capacity within the next 4 weeks when the survey was sent out in mid-May. A majority of the participants expected their capacity would be between 51 and 100% back to normal within the next 4 weeks. And then finally, we asked all of the participants about the current barriers to full capacity at their facility. The barriers most commonly noted as significant were patient fear of COVID-19 and state and hospital restrictions and mandates.
Thank you, Megan. Today's broadcast will be recorded for future playback. Due to time constraints, though, questions will be answered throughout today's session using the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your screen. When you're submitting your questions, please make sure that you ask a specific panelist, and we will do our best to answer your question when possible. We are happy to announce that the ABCP has approved the Joint Perfusion COVID-19 Task Force for this webinar to offer 1.7 Category 1 CEUs. After the conclusion of the broadcast, all attendees will be provided with a link to a survey in order to claim the credits for participating in the meeting, and as well as to provide the task force with information on the current operating status of your program. Even if you do not plan to claim credit, we encourage you please to respond to the survey. The survey link will also be sent at the end of this. And then all certificates will be mailed out within 4 weeks. And then we would also like to thank Medtronic for sponsoring this webinar.
Thank you. We'll start today with Al Stammers from Specialty Care. Al?
Thank you, Carla. Good day, everybody. And I'd like to begin by thanking the task force for putting on these wonderful webinars, which have been extremely informative. Could you advance the slide, Kate? Thank you so much. What I'd like to do is just present over the next 8 minutes some of the information that we've been, can you go back? Go one forward, there you go, thank you. Some of the information we've been able to glean from Specialty Care. We're an organization that has 3 major service lines: perfusion, intraoperative neuromonitoring, and surgical services. We perform about 200,000 procedures per year. And this first graph shows the distribution of those procedures. All of the graphs that will follow will have the same horizontal axis, which is weeks of the year, underneath that shown by the months. And then on the left, it'll either be percent or case number. So the very left-hand side, we're seeing case number, and we could see that approximately the 11th week of this year, we had a precipitous decline. On the right-hand side shows that percent, and overall there was greater than a 50% reduction in total cases, during that time period. I'd like to thank Dr. Eric Tisdale and Tom Coley for participating with the summary of this information. Next slide. This is just a time frame showing what was occurring when. First death in the United States was reported on March 1st in Seattle. CMS delayed elective surgeries or recommended that in mid-March on the 18th. And we peaked in case numbers, and this is all United States data, around the 4th through the 9th, averaging about 34,000 cases per day. These are new cases. And as of yesterday, we're reporting just under 19,000 cases per day. So just to put an idea of what the numbers are as we move forward. Next slide. This very busy slide is actually broken down in the next slide, but this shows a combination of the procedures that are being performed. We have 26 different categories, but some of the major ones were shown here. And you can see that overall it was pretty consistent across the entire grouping of procedure types. Next slide. And this just shows that of all the procedure types, the only two that really had a quicker return to normality were reoperative CABGs and combined mitral valve and CABGs. All the others are still depressed, down approximately 25% of their case number. Next slide, please. This is a distribution of the cases by region. We separate our regions into four: Northeast, Midwest, South, and West. And the greatest deflection that we saw was in the Northeast, probably no surprise to anybody, where the cases reduced over 70%. And these are just perfusion cases. Now, everything I'm presenting here on out are just perfusion-related cases or cardiac surgery. So the Northeast was the greatest hit, and you can see by the recovery, they're also taking the longest to recover. And we find that in our ECMO procedures, primarily in the tri-state area, Pennsylvania and Delaware, and excuse me, and also in New Jersey, that we're seeing a decline in those cases as well. Next slide. This is just showing the regions, and again, the Northeast in the upper right quadrant is the one that has the greatest decline. Next slide. If we look at the individual hospital size to see if it affected the size of the hospital by annual cases, we see that the hospitals performing less than 100 annual cases are the quickest to return to normal. That's in the purple bar line. And the hospitals that are performing more than 100, thanks, Kate, and more than 100 and even greater than 200 are having a slower rate of recovery, as shown on the bottom right-hand side of the graph. Next slide. If we look at individual hospitals, we just took a random sampling of some hospitals performing up to 1,000 cases per year and some down in the 100 range. And we can see that it really hasn't been affected by the size of the hospital by annual case numbers, and that there is a very similar with just a couple of hospitals that had a quicker return to the amount of cases that were being done. And this is comparing 2019 data to 2020. Next slide. If we look at the age of seeing if certain patients are being performed who are perhaps more critical or elderly, we see that the elderly are the purple pattern there. And as we approach the end of May, this is as of last week, we can see that there really is no difference other than some blips that have occurred throughout the weeks with more patients in the greater than 85 year needing surgery. Next slide. And further, if we just make two buckets of these categories, those that are under 70 years, which are shown in the blue line, and those that are over 70. Again, it looks like the younger patients may have had a quicker inflection to return to getting surgery, which may reflect perhaps some of the urgency of that particular patient population over the 70-year-olds. Next slide. This is a summary slide of our ECMO procedures, and now we changed the horizontal axis is just January through May of this year. The blue line is the 2019 data. These are actual case numbers, and the red line are current 2020 numbers. So in January of this year, we did 121 separate ECMO procedures. And as we compare that to the 74 on the right-hand side, we see that the reduction rates are shown here. And there's a little bit of variability that's occurring, but in April, looking at the red 2020, in March, we see that we dropped approximately 25% in ECMO cases. Next slide. And if we look at those cases, what was occurring, the purple line now is showing our COVID cases. We've done 89 COVID cases on ECMO to date. So thanks, Kate. Right in the center there, that 49 compared to the 74, clearly the majority of cases we're doing are COVID. And if you look at now this new graphic on the right-hand side, we see that ECMO cases that are COVID made up 20% of our total case number, 66% in April, and then 32% in May. So we're starting to see a decline in that number. Next slide. This just shows, before I conclude, that the nadir occurred on the left-hand side. These are all of our cases right about April 10th through 13th. And then on the right-hand side shows that the distribution for neuromonitoring, surgical services, and perfusion, with our neuromonitoring occurring almost back to normal as of last week. So to conclude, and Kate, you can run through these. The nadir case number was seen first in the first week of April with a 50% reduction. Northeast was the one primarily affected. During the slowdown, cabbage reops and mitral valve cabbages continued. And right now we're at a 25% reduction compared to the same time in 2019. And we're predicting that probably by the end of June or first week of July, we'll be back to our normal case number and predictions. And 66% of all ECMO cases were COVID positive in this past month, April. Thank you very much for allowing us to present this information. And these are our contact emails if anybody needs to get a hold of Eric, Tom, or myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. Our next speaker is Brian Lynch with Perfusion.com. Brian?
Is my video on?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. You can hit me on the next slide.
Okay.
Yep. So just a little bit about Perfusion.com in case everybody doesn't know. We're about 140 perfusionists. We're in about 15 states. I think Perfusion.com is the third largest perfusion company in the US. We're maybe 1/5 or 1/6 the size of specialty care and CCS. We provide full-time temp services and ECMO services. And if you look at this map, some of these accounts are more of our permanent or semi-permanent temp accounts. So, but that's our distribution around the country. Next slide. So similar to what, Al presented here, we saw a dip week 11. I think that's week 11 is May 15th. It's March. And then, we saw a pickup that week of week 18, which is April 27th. So we broke it down here a little bit differently than what Al did. We've got ATS. This is combination ATS and CPB together. CPB, that's obviously, just the CPB cases. And then standby for us includes TAVR in that particular graph. So, one more slide back there. And then, at the peak point there, week 18, we had a 52% reduction in CPB cases. I didn't do a graph, for that trending line like Al put together, but that was our main dip, right there, week 18. Next slide. So here's looking at it a little bit different way. I mean, this is a very similar graph, again, showing the dates there, with the starting point kind of being March 15th, and then everything kind of picking back up again the week of the 18th. This shows the volumes a little bit more clearly. We're still maybe only back to 80% of where we're at before. Next slide. So this is ECLS, and maybe this is not as meaningful, with our company. We don't have a lot of accounts that do ECMO, and during this period here, one of our major accounts that does ECMO, we kind of help them out on a temporary basis, and they they furloughed or some of their perfusionists or had their perfusionists take over doing the ECMO. So that during this period here, I guess you can't see my mouse moving, but it's in between week 11 and week 18, or maybe week 13 and week 18. We weren't doing some of those ECMO, some of this normal ECMO cases that we would be logging in here. This does not include any temporary service ECMO, that we would do. So these are only kind of our full-time accounts where we cover ECMO. Next slide. So I thought this would be interesting to look at. So this is one piece of information we do have on our website, and we do have employment data and we track jobs. So I broke this down in the same way, by week. And I thought it was really odd here that the jobs and applications almost exactly correlate. So the applications is the green line and the jobs are the blue line. And they correlate actually perfectly. I had to check this, a couple of times, but you can see there at the beginning of the year, week 1, that would be January 1st. Typically people aren't applying for jobs around the holiday. And then, I don't know that we've really seen a trend there, but maybe week 17, maybe a possible downtrend, somewhere in there. I know we've heard stories of people being furloughed and in some cases people being laid off, although, again, I think most of those have been furloughs and temporary, but we haven't seen really a major trend there with the job data that I would think would be meaningful to report on. Next slide. Where we have seen, some sort of impact, and this is just an interesting report from our Google Analytics application, but this is the website data, and we did see a spike there, around April on our website data, and that's continued. So in April, we had a 35% increase in web traffic overall, and that's kind of continued on. So presumably people are at home and they are going online to get information. Obviously, we had our Santa Bill meeting in April, so that may attribute to some of that spike that we saw. I just thought that was interesting, interesting to look at. Next slide. And I just wanted to say thank you to all of our teams there. I've got a couple of pictures, including Carla and maybe some other names there, but everybody's worked really hard and contributed in various ways during this time, and it's we really appreciate all the great work from all of our team members.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Sean Murtha, and he is with Comprehensive Care Services. Sean?
You're muted right now.
Sorry about that. Just can you go to the next slide? So a little bit, we tried to, not dissimilar from the last two speakers. Interesting seeing their slides. We've seen something fairly similar. I basically, our organization, we have more regions necessarily, but I tried to amalgamate these in a way that would make a little bit more sense compared to the last things we talked about. So our west and central, north and south. So what we saw, interestingly, we look at data as it relates to our trailing 12-month average, just to get an idea of what we're doing over the prior part of the year, before the prior COVID period. And we saw basically a 62% decrease overall from our trailing 12-month average. So a fairly nice drop. Very consistent with everybody else's data. About week 14 is where we saw our nadir. Interestingly, in the South area, we had a little more dip in the 15th. We're a large provider in Florida, so a bunch of our institutions got those cruise ships and everything that came down. So big population down there. So I think that contributed a little bit to that area. Interestingly, looking at this data though, our west area, so that would be in the whole Nevada, Colorado over there, they hardly had any decrease at all. And that was really interesting for us to see. I think largely related to the state's response to elective procedures and doing things like that. Our central region saw the next largest decline, about 47%. And our northern drop was actually rather moderate, and it was mostly related to one really big institution that does about 2,000 hearts. So that was kind of a big drop, but they recovered rather quickly. Overall, hearts are recovering rapidly. don't exactly have the rest of the data that was incomplete. So we're about back to normal. We believe by the end of this month, we're back sort of at normal volume. Basically, the trends are kind of showing that. So that we thought that was pretty interesting. Interestingly, too, which I don't have this data, and I wish I would have been able to do it more quickly, but we saw a rapid increase in more of the standby TAVR procedures than on the bypass procedures. And those remain fairly consistent across the time period. I think mostly people are a bit more comfortable with the non-invasive procedures. We continue to do emergencies and those kinds of things. So that was rather telling. But the next slide, if you can move to the next slide, I took a look at our, all of our periodic blood management procedures. That'd be ATS, autogen fusion, and PRP, those kinds of things, BMAC. And we saw a precipitous drop in that COVID period, and it's recovering much more slowly. I think that's related largely to the elective procedure slides. So I thought that was interesting data. It's really a lot slower. So we saw almost a precipitous drop in a week, and we're not really even at our 50% recovery rate at week 5 weeks later. So we really haven't even reached that yet. As a matter of scale, just in cardiac surgery or perfusion related procedures, we annualize specifically there around a little over 40,000 a year. And then autotransfusion is standalone autotransfusion is about 3/4 of that number. So it's a sizable population. Volume distribution of related to regions, largely in the South, so that skews the data just a little bit, but nothing significant. Next slide. This is interesting. This is our ECMO slide. This is the way we look at it. Sorry. We look at seasonality and we look at hours as relative to procedures to try to normalize our workload. So if you look at this slide, it shows interestingly. If you look at the top slide, 2018, we had a decent number of ECMO. It ramped up a lot, and you can see that. If you look at the corresponding slide below it, that demonstrates the seasonality or normalization of what we would normally like to see. So you see it's fairly consistent. If you look at 2019 and 2018 related to the hours there between the April and May time period, that was about that time when the discussion about reimbursement for ECMO was happening. So we saw a pretty large decrease in that relatively, but it kind of got back to a normal seasonality scope. You can see the two slides together. So nothing really changed. If you look at now 2020, the thing to note is we really didn't see a change in seasonality. As a matter of fact, we saw a decrease in number just a bit. We still have a lot of people on as a matter of hours, so we think that that's going to have an uptick curve. But what we do believe is that ECMO, COVID didn't really impact the amount of ECMO that we did per se. Regarding hours, we think that's largely due to the fact that a lot of the same patient population, flu, non-flu patients, a lot of our ECMO patients weren't tested or have been tested to find out they were COVID related. I thought that was pretty interesting. And if you look at all the time, we also see a decrease from post-cardiotomy ECMO. So the increase in volume you see in the top hours for hours, the green number, reflects a big push prior to the COVID period, but then a decrease over time. So as a matter of fact, we'll do relatively about a little over, prior COVID, we were tracking to do about over 140-some thousand hours of ECMO on an annualized basis. So we do a fair amount. So, and again, this is certainly also, if I had more time, it's interesting geographic, what types of patients and those types of things, but it seems fairly consistent. And that's all the data I got. Thanks for the opportunity, AMSEC, putting this on, and the rest of our colleagues. I think it's really helpful to see everybody getting together and looking at this stuff from a data-driven perspective. Thanks for your time, everybody.
Sean, Brian, and Al, thank you very much for sharing that data, kind of validating across all three major service providers that we're all kind of seem to be in the same boat a little bit. We appreciate hearing from our service provider partners. And now we're going to shift gears just a little bit and talk to our manufacturing partners and see how they're managing this crisis. And so Brennan Stonerock from Spectrum Medical will kick that off for us. Brennan?
Thanks, Jim. Good afternoon, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Brendan Stonerock. I'm a perfusionist by trade, and after leaving clinical practice, I worked for McKay for a little over 5 years. And now I manage clinical training here in the US, as well as our sales in the Southeast for Spectrum. So just wanted to first of all thank AMSEC for the invite and for everyone taking the time today, but also for the work you guys have put in over the last few weeks during this crisis. I'm fortunate enough to get to speak with hospitals and clinicians all across the country. And it's really impressive how the community has been able to mobilize, and even in the face of all this uncertainty. So just wanted to talk a little bit about what Spectrum has kind of tried to do and help, as well as some of the products that we have. And we just try to engage and listen with current and prospective customers, listen to challenges they face, and form that partnership to create solutions to meet those needs. I think we're uniquely positioned at Spectrum to be able to quickly adapt to the changing needs of the medical community. Being a software-based platform, improvements can be developed and pushed to customers much sooner than if hospitals had to purchase new hardware or go through the capital route to bring in new technology. So when talking about our ECLS system, patient safety and quality was at the heart of it. We also wanted to create a modular system, one that could adapt to the different needs of customers across the globe. COVID, I think, has shown us that not every clinician has the same challenges, but we wanted to create technology that was adaptable enough to fit a wide range of needs. And so specifically in response to COVID, we are taking measures to make sure we have plenty of disposables and inventory to meet whatever the customer demand may be coming out of this. And kind of at the heart of all Spectrum solutions is the Quantum Workstation. This is our new Quantum Workstation called the Elite. And again, as mentioned, what's unique about it is a software-based console designed to continuously evolve over its capital life cycle. So we have non-invasive sensors for measuring hemoglobin and saturations, both arterial and venous, and multiple flow bubble sensors, pressure sensors that can serve regulate pumps to improve patient and circuit safety. And through integration of other third-party devices, such as the mechanical ventilator, patient monitors, cerebral oximeters, et cetera, we're able to collect all of the important information pertaining to the patient and centralize it to one location for analysis and decision-making. But at the end of the day, we wanted something that was fairly simple, easy to use at the bedside, which you can see here. So we have a simple screen to adjust RPMs, flows, et cetera, activate or turn off or change pressure limits and interventions, bubbles, things like that. So kind of continuing on, you can see here, this is something we call Live View. And hopefully you can see some of the benefits of integrating data from all the devices used to monitor patients during whatever level of support it may be. As we get this data into our Vision server, we can set up compliance alerts, but also display the data for remote viewing from anywhere in the hospital, or anywhere in the world with an internet connection. And we think there's great value in clinicians being able to safely monitor these patients without necessarily having to be in the room or having to be even in the hospital. And so by seeing all of this data in a central location, but outside the room, patient contacts and exposures can be reduced. And COVID has kind of shown us that our technology can be adapted even further. And we're now working to make changes to allow clinicians to make remote changes, again, not being in the room. So for measurements like sweep, FiO2, et cetera, and we're looking to launch that in a future software update. And so as we move on to our ventilation module here, which is essentially our electronic blender and vacuum regulator, it also has multiple inputs for connecting flow, bubble probes, pressure sensors, and temperatures, but also inlet gases for oxygen, room air, carbon dioxide, and finally a vacuum supply for both VAVD and WAG or scavenge lines. And then lastly, this is how we measure and calculate many of the physiologic values such as arterial PCO2, PO2, DO2I, and the other goal-directed perfusion parameters, but all non-invasively without per-case disposable costs. So moving on to some of the disposables we were recently launching here, and talking about what the goals were when we designed a centrifugal pump. The first was a low prime volume pump that was efficient enough to support a wide range of patient populations. And as you can see, our CP22 has a potential energy to flow up to 8 liters a minute with a total pressure of 600 millimeters of mercury. The second design characteristic was to integrate these pressure and temperature monitoring into the pump to eliminate the need for invasive monitoring, which are subject to clot burden, potential infection, maybe even accidental air embolus to the patient. And you can see an additional option here. We'll have a built-in heat exchanger that's compatible with any water-based systems, as well as our future heater cooler, Mr. Frosty, Some of you may have heard of this, the glycol-based system that eliminates the need for cleaning, as well as the potential risk for certain infections. So moving on into disposables, we are working on this and submitting to the FDA. This is our oxygenator or ventilator. And same like with the centrifugal pump, we had specific design considerations. Number one being the issue of clotting. So by creating a cylindrically shaped membrane and mimicking the shape of a blood vessel, we can reduce stagnant areas, platelet activation, and hopefully increase efficiency. Next, we centrally place the inlet and outlet, which allows for improved velocity and flow. This reduces the turbulence and stagnation, which leads to less clot formation. And you can see here, we have a very even or uniform distribution of blood flow across all sectors of the membrane. And a controlled ventilation perfusion mismatch allows us to adequately add oxygen to the blood while at the same time removing nitrogen from the blood. This is how we create this hypobaric state, and are happy to discuss more of that if anyone has any questions. There are going to be specific sizes for all patient populations, and will be available with PMP fibers. The ECLS therapy we think should be tailored to specific patients, and a one-size-fits-all mentality has proven to be ineffective in terms of pry volume, unique circuit configurations, which can lead to increased clotting, hemolysis, and even staph confusion. All of these disposables will be coated with PC1036, which can be found on many drug-eluting stents and has superior antithrombotic properties. And again, just to kind of review some of the software piece, this is one of the newest projects or features we're working into our technology, and that's the ELSO registry. We're building it into our Viper software, and it can be used to complete the registry in a much more automated fashion, improving the efficiency of staff utilization, and that we don't have to spend hours reviewing paper or electronic chart searching for this data, but also the actual data reporting itself. We hope that it's a little bit more accurate without manual input. And as mentioned, being a software-based system, all customers who work with us would have access to this at no additional cost. So you can see the ELSO complications are built in and other parameters specific to that registry. So, and kind of lastly, education, right, is a big component to success in all of medicine, but especially cardiac surgery and the ICU, ECMO areas. And one of the things we've kind of developed is this bridge e-learning platform, or not necessarily developed, but kind of tapped into. And this is our platform for uploading any spectrum-specific trainings for customers, but it's also a platform for customers to upload their own hospital-specific trainings. But it's all managed via a central system with compliance built in. You can understand who's doing what and when, and push training and education materials out very quickly. So in summary, we've tried to create a simple system centered around the Quantum Workstation. This workstation can drive centrifugal pumps for ECLS needs, can be used to build compliance tools into clinician workflow, as well as provide decision support or logical algorithms to aid the bedside clinician during patient support. All of this is centered around data acquisition, calibration analytics, with the goal being high quality yet repeatable outcomes. So with that, I want to say thanks again, and I yield any remaining time if I got it.
Thank you, Brennan. Up next, we'll have Chris Pierce from Medtronic to shed some light on what they're doing with this time.
Thanks, Jim. So as I said, my name is Christopher Pierce. I'm the Senior Medical Education Program Manager for Extracorporeal Technologies and Extracorporeal Life Support here at Medtronic. I'm also a clinical perfusionist and certified ECMO specialist. Next slide. At Medtronic, our vision is optimal cardiac surgical care. So we're committed to advancing extracorporeal technologies and extracorporeal life support by delivering the innovative tools and world-class education that helps you shape the future of cardiac surgery. Next slide. In the setting of COVID-19, Medtronic is mobilizing all its assets to produce and distribute the products and therapies that can help COVID-19 patients and their caregivers. This includes ventilators, pulse oximeters, and ECMO products in particular. And we're doing all we can to increase production and distribution of these products around the world. You may have heard about ways we're looking to even further ramp up production, like our publicly sharing the design specs for one of our ventilators and collaborating with companies in other industries like Tesla to facilitate different aspects of ventilator production. We're optimistic these actions will bear fruit. A global pandemic requires global solutions. No one company can deliver all the products and supplies needed for this stage. We can only defeat this virus by acting in unison with smart and focused strategies for production, allocation, and resourcing. So we're working directly with hospital systems and governments to get our products where they're needed the most. We're tapping into our engineering expertise in other ways to support ventilator and PPE production. We've adapted our Medtronic care management services to remotely screen and monitor COVID-19 patients, including our own employees. We also announced we're working with Intel to enable further remote monitoring for our ventilator systems to help reduce the risk for healthcare professionals. And our remote monitoring capabilities and our other business units are helping to manage patients remotely and promote social distancing when possible. In March, the Medtronic Foundation donated $11.2 million to global COVID relief efforts. This most recent funding will help more than a dozen organizations, providing critical support and equipment, including PPE to frontline health workers. The donation will also be used by organizations for COVID-19 training and preparation and to provide health, economic, and food services for vulnerable populations. Our employees are also actively engaged in volunteering and donations with a 2-to-1 employee match from the Medtronic Foundation. Next slide. I'm proud to work for Medtronic and proud of our response from our CEO, as he notes in this open letter. We know this virus can and will be defeated, and we will do our utmost to make that a reality. We will do all we can safely do to meet the market and its supply needs. We're working 24/7. We're reallocating our people to critical product manufacturing, and we're increasing our overall production of COVID-19 related products, including ECLS. Other life-saving products are still needed and still will be needed as you resume your surgical practices. Despite rapidly changing and challenging freight availability, product shifts, border closures, and travel restrictions, our global supply chain continues to deliver the right products to the right patients at the right time. It's not business as usual, we recognize that, and we'll be here to help support you as needed. We've deprioritized and postponed non-critical business activities, including clinical trials that don't support or might interfere with COVID-19 operations. And our field team, which is used to helping you guys in person, is using new ways like video chat for technical support and training. We're making every effort to reduce exposure and prioritize safety and adapting our activities to follow WHO, CDC, and your own facilities' new policies. We're staying true to our commitment to integrity and ethics written into our mission more than 60 years ago. We will never compromise our integrity. We will put the patient's needs at the forefront of our decision-making, and we will not raise prices or pit one customer against another in a busy bidding process for these critical products. And we're committed to our employees. Over 90,000 employees at Medtronic come to work every day with one common goal, our mission, to alleviate pain, restore health, and extend life. That mission has fueled our innovation and led to millions of lives being saved and improved. For employees who can work remotely, we've shifted our global work from home approach. And in other roles like manufacturing and distribution, we've increased sterilization and cleaning measures, all while practicing physical distancing and prescribed hygiene measures like regular hand washing. Next slide. So at Medtronic, our quest for medical excellence drives us to think and work differently and develop purposeful solutions with clinical and economic value. We forge new partnerships and collaborate to solve the world's most challenging healthcare issues and reach more patients in more places worldwide. That's why we've partnered with MC3 Cardiopulmonary to develop next generation technology specifically designed to advance ECLS. Like us, MC3 believes in innovation through research, technology, and ingenuity, and is today working to serve the global community by creating medical devices designed to address unmet, acute, and chronic cardiopulmonary needs. As partners, we're working with shared focus and passion on a pipeline of products designed for ECMO and indicated for ECMO. Next slide. We're adapting the way we work with you in these challenging times, leveraging resources and tools to meet virtually expanded educational offerings on Medtronic Academy, and partnering with you to host informational webinars like this one, the Joint Perfusion COVID Taskforce. Many of you have seen the new FDA enforcement policy for COVID and cardiopulmonary devices. At Medtronic, we're taking into account device use and patient safety and a measured approach to evaluate what products we align with this new policy. Next slide. At Medtronic, we've been working since the early phases of the pandemic to continue to support our customers. And while the world's a bit chaotic right now, we're working to ensure that we get clinicians and patients our products and support. This goes beyond just our ability to produce the product. It also has to do with our ability to get you the right products at the right time while ensuring that our employees work in safe conditions, including appropriate physical distancing and PPE for our manufacturing lines. COVID-19 really changed and challenged all of our activities, but our teams have responded quickly. For example, with the number of commercial flights down, we needed to shift how we ship products from commercial carriers to more freight carriers. I actually didn't appreciate prior to COVID-19 how much of our products shipped on commercial aircraft. We also work with governments to help break down barriers and ensure we're able to ship the products you need when you need it, but also get the supplies we need to build more. Next slide. In closing, I just want to express on behalf of all of us at Medtronic our sincere thank you for your bravery and perseverance through this terrible time. We're with you, and we're focused on helping you through this recovery phase and beyond. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Up next is we're going to hear about Gettings' approach from Alan Chen. Alan? Actually, that's my mistake. It's Dennis Cook from Quest.
That's okay. I don't mind pinch hitting twice.
Sorry about that, Dennis.
That's no problem at all. Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody as well for everyone at AMSAC and on the task force for hosting these virtual meetings. I think it's really critical from an information standpoint, but also to keep the perfusion community connected during these times. I think all of us, certainly healthcare providers, are there at the hospitals working through their daily responsibilities. Those of us in manufacturing often are working remotely right now, and so it's really, really important to stay connected. So I do want to thank you for that. All of us at Quest are truly appreciative of the efforts of the healthcare providers in taking care of their patients and maintaining all this during this period of time. So we want you to know that we thank you for that. We have done things to make sure that we have uninterrupted product supply, and just know that we're continuing to work for you. And we look forward to continuing that relationship during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. Next slide, please. Quest is part of Atrion Corporation, and Atrion has three very distinct divisions. They have Quest Medical, who I'm with, Halkey Roberts, and Atrion Medical Products. Halkey is based in Florida, Atrion is based in Alabama, and of course Quest is based in Allen, Texas, just out of Dallas. Roughly around 700 employees. Next slide, please. So within the Quest brand, and certainly actually throughout the Atrion brand, all of our parts are manufactured or made by us here in the United States, and we have 100% US labor force. And so that ensures us an uninterrupted supply of parts and materials that we need to make the product. So we're committed on that front to new product development, to manufacturing technology, and to workforce development. Next slide, please. So part of what we did in looking at the effect of this pandemic is it actually impacted within the Quest Medical division. We have several product lines, and the change in what we saw earlier in terms of elective surgery obviously had an impact on the MPS side, but we have other product lines as well, where actually the demand for product increased. And so we did a number of things. What we did is we put our workforce into as much as possible remote for people that could. We went to a 7-day schedule, and we went to like a team A, team B approach from the manufacturing and clean room standpoint, so that if somebody did test positive for COVID, we wouldn't lose the entire manufacturing floor clean room operation. We have had no employees at Quest that have tested positive for COVID-19 or been exposed to anybody that has. All of this has ensured us to have a steady supply of product, and also to meet that increased demand on some of the other product lines that we have. We continue to closely follow the guidelines from the state of Texas and the Collin County where we're actually located. And we yesterday had a meeting to begin to start phasing in people back into the office by areas of operation. So for instance, accounting will come in 1 week, and the next week we'll have people from customer service coming in. So we'll start phasing people back into the office. They are doing temperature checks at the entrance on everybody coming in. So we're maintaining that level of safety as well. Next slide, please. Along with that, we're practicing social distancing as much as possible. As I said, we split the manufacturing shift across 7 days into 2 teams. Only essential personnel are allowed in the facility. We actually had to put a sign on the front door. We are not Quest Diagnostics. Please do not come in asking for any sort of a COVID test to decrease traffic, people trying to come into the front lobby. We increased the facility cleaning. It was performed every night and actually increased the level of disinfection. PPE was made available to all of our employees, and we actually provided personal PPE kits for employees to take home and use when they're away from the office. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we have different product lines. The infusion market saw a significant increase in the production and sales of COVID-19 specific IV sets, specifically IV tubing sets, extension sets, and manifolds. We actually, and I also launched another product which is called Clinch, and I'll have a slide that shows a little bit more of that, but it's a non-inclusive securement band. On the cardiovascular side, we saw a reduction in the number of heart surgeries being performed and impacted obviously our perfusion product line. But in the midst of this, we've also applied for 510(k) approval for a new product launch. So while we're trying to maintain sales and inventory on the MPS side, we're also preparing a marketing plan and a rollout plan for a new product and looking ahead and forecasting what that model looks like as we come out of this COVID environment. Next slide, please. So this gives you a little bit of an idea of some of the products on the IV side. Some of these are products that were added in response to COVID. So for instance, on IV, there's an IV extension set that was put together that allowed the patient's IV pump to be outside of the room so that it minimized contact with the healthcare provider and also minimized the number of times they had to change the PPE from going into the room. There was a multi-port set that was also introduced because a lot of these patients were receiving multiple drugs. So it allowed them to infuse multiple drugs at one time versus having one drug go in and then waiting for the next drug to be loaded. On the right-hand side is the Clinch product we talked about. It's, again, a non-inclusive securement band. It can be used for a number of things, organized tubing, organized power cords, cables, just lots of different places it can be used virtually anywhere in the hospital. Next slide, please. So this is actually a flyer that one of our hospitals put together on that extension set for IV tubing. Instructions on how it can be used within their hospital. We had a number of calls coming and orders coming in for this product. Next slide, please. So within Quest, these are our product lines. We have the MPS.
I think we may have lost him there. So I'll just give him another second to rejoin, and then if he's not able to rejoin, we can move on to the next presentation.
Okay. Well, it does look like we've lost Dennis, so we will go ahead and move on now to Alan Chen from Gettings and hear how they're approaching this crisis and how they're helping us out. Alan?
Thanks, Jim, and thank you to the rest of the task force and AMSEC for providing this forum and doing what they can to increase communication and information sharing. Next slide, please. First off, I would like to thank all healthcare workers out there, perfusionists and everyone else that are taking care of both COVID patients and other patients during this pandemic. Next, please. So Getinga covers a number of product areas. So you may be most familiar with our cardiopulmonary devices, oxygenators, centrifugal pumps, cannulas, but we also have a portfolio of ventilation products, and we're actually pretty diversified. We also do OR build-outs, life sciences, assisting pharmaceutical companies. So this crisis has really affected our company in a number of ways. Being a global company, we saw this hit different areas at different times. Shortly after the new year, we started seeing new activity in Asia. That was followed by Europe, and then finally North America, starting in March mostly. Next slide, please. So we saw a tremendous increase in demand on our cardiopulmonary products, but that was nothing compared to the ventilation side. So we quickly kicked into gear. Last year, we produced about 10,000 servo ventilators. And this year, we're on pace to produce about 2.5 times that. So about 26,000 ventilators. To assist with that effort, Getinga borrowed a pretty large sum of money, about $100 million, to finance production and expansion of life-saving equipment, including ventilators. Next slide, please. And we've also shifted resources and personnel to make sure our most critical product lines were not impacted by COVID-19, specifically with cardiopulmonary products. So as governments were implementing restrictions, border closures, stay-at-home orders, we work closely with governments and regulatory agencies to secure supplies and reduce external bottlenecks. And I'm also pleased to say that we're still not caught up 100%, given the unprecedented amount of orders we've seen, but we have significantly increased production. This year for our cardiac disposables, we've increased production by about 24%. And we have ambitious plans throughout this year for further expansion. So we're going to keep doing it, and we're going to keep going and trying to produce as much as we can to support the clinicians. Next slide, please. And another thing that Getinga is trying to do is get relevant info out to the community. So we noticed a lot of questions coming up early on about oxygenators and the potential to transmit viral particles across oxygenators. We've been monitoring AMSEC forums and other forums, and greatly appreciate the questions and the discussions that have come up there. A few weeks ago, we issued a document, and it's now posted on Getinga's COVID-19 Resource Center, talking about presenting some information about what's known about viral transmission specific to COVID. We also included some considerations for disinfecting equipment when using it on COVID patients. And most recently, we also released some guidelines for CardioHelp, consistent with FDA guidelines for emergency use. We recently released guidelines on how to use CardioHelp HLS sets with COVID-19 patients for ECMO. Next slide, please. And as we all know, just the way of interacting, of working has greatly changed. Some things will never change. So reps, especially, and our service team, they're still needed very much on site. So critical activities are ongoing and to the best of our abilities based on local regulations. And we're also trying to maintain social distancing, yet still provide training and support through virtual options. So recently we formed a partnership with a platform created by Allegro to help better convey information, videos, manuals, troubleshooting guides to customers. Getting also has an internal training platform that we're greatly expanding our virtual offerings on, both live sessions and on demand. Next slide, please. So thanks again, everyone, for the time, the forum. If any other questions come up, please feel free to put it in the Q&A or reach out to me directly. That's my cell phone number right there. And thanks again, AMSECT.
Thank you, Alan. Next, we've got Larry Petrie talking to us about LeaveInnova's experience. Larry?
Thank you very much. I want to start by thanking the Joint Task Force for the invitation to present. It's great to see the different groups coming together and address the unique challenges that we have with COVID-19. I'm sure some of you have faced some new challenges with the reduction in elective surgeries. Others have faced challenges of ECMO coverage, loss of key team members to quarantines, and maybe some personal challenges like us of taking on homeschooling. So on behalf of LeaveInnova, thank you for meeting those challenges head on and the sacrifices that you've made for patients. Next slide, please. So LeaveInnova is committed to supporting our employees, our customers, and the patients that together we provide care for. Over the next few minutes, I want to give you an overview of how we have responded to this global challenge. Next slide, please. LeaveInnova has 4 major facilities that serve perfusion. These are in Munich, Germany, Miranda, Italy, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Denver, Colorado. All of these have remained open since the crisis began, including our plant in Italy, which was at the forefront of the news when the pandemic spread in Europe back in February. At that time, we began to work with local governments and our carriers around the world to maintain our supply chain, our production, and our shipping of finished goods. Transportation of raw materials to our facilities and finished goods to our customers was a key concern. And by anticipating that need, we maintained a steady movement of material by land, sea, and air, and that continues today. Next slide, please. In the US, our perfusion pack production continues normally. Our supply chain and our distribution network is also functioning normally, with daily shipments to and from our regional distribution centers, where we store inventory and we can make daily shipments to our customers in a shorter amount of time. Our customer service team is fully operational. We already had plans in place for that team to work from home if needed, so that transition was seamless. And similar to what was reported earlier, we are seeing an increase in orders for perfusion products. Next slide, please. LeaveInnova employees have also banded together to give back to our communities. This is an article from our internal newsletter about a territory manager that personally delivered a Sentiva device needed for a 2-year-old boy with severe epilepsy. In what would have normally been done by flight, that delivery involved driving 1,100 miles across Spain overnight, crossing different regions and travel restrictions, and we were able to deliver that device for an 8 a.m. surgery on very short notice. At our facility in Miranda, Italy, where our oxygenators and other perfusion devices are manufactured, that facility donated $6,000 towards the purchase of equipment to sterilize ambulances that were operated by a local nonprofit agency. In the US, we recently had a field service rep that was not able to install some newly purchased S5 pumps that were intended for ECMO use. So 2 other service reps from surrounding territories came together, drove over 200 miles, and completed the installation. So we're very proud of our employees that embody our value to put patients first. Next slide, please. Regarding expanded indications for use for some of our devices, FDA provided guidance for industry on April 5th to expand the availability of devices used for ECMO during this public health emergency. While this change affected only the US, we formed several global cross-functional teams to review how we could implement this guidance. In about 10 working days, we reviewed the guidance requirements, conducted all the internal reviews, and created the new documents needed to provide these expanded indications. Using the flexibility that FDA provided, we can now better support the challenges that you faced during the crisis. And if you need additional information on how to use any of these devices, our account executives and clinical specialists are available. We're particularly pleased with the success we had with our Tandem Life platform and the work our team in Pittsburgh and the clinical team that supports it around the country has done to make that technology available to support more patients in more places. Next slide, please. So to wrap this up, we will continue to adapt to the challenges COVID-19 has created with the goal of supporting you and your work to treat patients. Specifically for LivaNova employees, we've taken safety and protection to a priority. We're paying attention to their health and making sure we provide a safe place for them to work. We've adapted our work practices to continue production, delivery, and clinical support. We have a very strong IT support structure that gives us great flexibility for future changes if needed. For our customers, please know that our finished goods are fully stocked. Our production and supply chain are healthy and they're ready. All support functions are functioning normally, and we're eager to work with you either on-site or virtually. To help you care for patients, all of our clinical-based team is fully available to support you with products, insight, and service, and that includes our account executives, our clinical specialists, and our field team. So in summary, we are fully operational. We're ready to support you. Again, our thanks to the task force to pull this together for the perfusion community, and we look forward to talking with you individually very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Now we're going to hear from David Fallon with Terumo. David?
David, you're still on mute right now.
About that. I will start again. I really appreciate the opportunity that AMSECT is giving Terumo to present at this forum today. I think it's really vital information that's coming across from everybody on the forum. But before I go any further, on behalf of everybody at Terumo, I want to say a very humble and sincere thank you for your efforts and the sacrifices and your incredible commitment, especially during this difficult time. You want to go to the next slide? I think you jumped. There we go. Thank you. As a global medical device company, Terumo has the responsibility not only to respond, but to help combat the COVID-19 pandemic. We are following 3 key policies to combat the pandemic. First, to protect the health and safety of all Terumo associates as our first priority. Second, to maintain stable supply of products to continuously meet the needs of our global customers. And third, to actively engage in and contribute to the prevention and treatment of the disease by maximizing Terumo's expertise and technologies. These policies are in line with our shared corporate values. We reference our corporate values with every decision we make and every activity we pursue. Now I'd like to give you some details about our activities in each of these areas. You can go to the next slide. All of Terumo's global sites have implemented strict prevention measures to help mitigate the spread of the virus. Terumo's plant in China was the first Terumo team to face the COVID-19 challenge. They managed with minimal disruption to supply and developed safety protocols that were used as a basis for protocols developed by their local government ministries. Some of the prevention strategies that we've set in place are listed here. We constantly evaluate these strategies and make sure that we're doing everything we need to do to adhere to government regulations, CDC guidelines, and protect our teams. As the spread of COVID-19 slows, states and economies are beginning to reopen and to resume normal activities. This marks the next phase of our response as we look to adapt our workforce and operations to fit the new normal and sharpen our services to meet the changing needs of our customers. We are committed to protecting the Terumo family, protecting our families, protecting our communities, and ultimately making sure that we are able to continue supporting the needs of you and your patients. Next slide, please. There's no doubt about it. These days are business as unusual. We are doing everything we can as a business while being safe and responsible to get you the products and support you need. We know your needs are changing, and we're committed to staying flexible and being here for you. First and foremost, our cardiovascular business has no supply disruptions due to the COVID-19 issue. We are working with our supply chain and continuously monitoring inventory levels. We are also analyzing and confirming demand expectations to make sure we are resource planning properly. And where possible and appropriate, we are building up inventory to make sure we're prepared for your needs today and in the future. Our field service teams are continuing to support our hardware customers, including equipment repairs and preventative maintenance, wherever and whenever we are needed and welcome to your sites. And finally, our teams are focused on new online tech support and training tools to help support you when your hospital prefers that we not be there in person. Next slide, please. Terumo CV Group is a global organization that has manufacturing facilities all over the world. Products are manufactured in the US, the EU, and Asia. Products are exported from these factories to countries all around the world. Here in Ann Arbor, we are a hardware center of excellence, manufacturing heart-lung machines and CDI monitoring systems. Next slide, please. And finally, I'm really happy to announce that in accordance with FDA guidance for industry, Terumo is finding ways to support use of some of our devices in ECMO therapy during the COVID-19 crisis. So far, this includes our Capiox FX25 oxygenator, CDI blood parameter monitoring systems, and Terumo Advanced System 1 perfusion system. You can contact your Terumo team for relevant clinical information. We are happy to be able to support your needs in cases where a traditional ECMO device may not be available. Next slide. So again, thank you very much, and thank you to AMSEC for allowing us to participate in this forum. The information that's come out of these sessions has been invaluable. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Wrapping things up from a manufacturer's perspective today is now going to be Megan Clancy with Boehringer. Megan?
Thanks, Jim. First, I wanted to extend our sincere gratitude to everyone in healthcare, everyone on the front lines, and particularly this task force for providing a great platform for education and information sharing to optimize patient and staff care around the global perfusion community. Behringer Labs is an entirely American medical device company, and all of our products relevant to this community make suction regulators. We've seen a massive increase over the last few months, particularly because, well, simply put, our devices suck. That's a really bad joke, but really, for every ICU patient, there are at least 3 applications requiring suction at any given time. As I said, we are entirely American made, and we're based just outside of Philadelphia. So we have been extremely fortunate to not have any supply chain disruptions, which was largely due to our streamlining of our manufacturing process by focusing production on our Care 4 regulator, the most versatile, and it's autoclavable, so it can be sterilized between patients. And next slide, please. So relevant to the perfusion community, we make the VAVD controller with the WAG functionality. There have been questions regarding additional needs for scavenging, and this is possible with our device, but we would encourage clinicians to double check with their ECMO circuit oxygenator manufacturer's guidelines for confirmation there. And Behringer Labs does not have any official FDA changes. However, we would like to emphasize the need for sterility and scavenging on all cardiac cases to ensure the protection of your patients, but also your entire OR staff. Behringer has adapted to this unprecedented time quickly and continuously. Physical measures have been taken to ensure seamless transitions in the safest manner possible. Every single Behringer Laboratories employee is healthy and working hard to ensure the quality and dependability that Behringer stands for. And once again, thank you to this entire community for your continued bravery and action in the face of crisis. It's been a pleasure taking part and seeing how everyone has stood up and worked hard. So thank you.
Thank you, Megan. I want to thank everyone again for joining us today for this webinar, all the attendees, our service providers and manufacturer partners. It's great to see how we're all kind of, validated by data, kind of sharing the same experience, and that our manufacturing partners are right there with us, helping us provide support to our patients. Don't forget that the webinar will be posted on the Joint Task Force website for future viewing. A survey will be sent out to all those who've joined us on their devices or PCs or phones today to complete the survey and get CEU credits. Also, if you're not planning to get CEU credits, we'd still really love your input on the survey to help kind of guide our future work. Thank you again to Medtronic for sponsoring this webinar. If your question wasn't addressed today, please be sure to check out the discussion forum on the Joint Task Force website and post your question there, and it will be monitored and hopefully answered. So thank you all again for joining us today. Please take care and be safe.